This happened in the early 90s. I was about 7 years old. I grew up on a semi-private lake in southern New Hampshire. Most houses were close to the main road and had a dock or small beach house right on the water. Our home, along with our neighbor 2 homes down, were right on the water. My childhood friend, his brother, our school buddy, and myself were swimming at their dock a few houses down in the evening during a very hot July. His aunt, who owns the house with her husband, a retired police detective, was on her second-story porch reading and watching us while we swam. It's a large lake, fed by 2 streams with a man-made dam at the other end, surrounded by forest. It was common over the years for the residents to find dead animals near the edge of the water, sometimes in the water or on the tiny island we nicknamed Blueberry Island, where the kids could camp overnight. Animals started dying. A lot. That one year, the loons that came back to the nest had been killed. Many dead ducks, coyotes, etc., around the edge of the lake and in the forest on the other side, where there were no houses, just conservation forest. Our neighbor's dog had drowned a week before, right in front of the house. My mom said she had gotten caught up in some weeds underwater. She was partially eaten with some weird marks on her body. Adults said not to worry, but would talk about how creepy it was in hushed voices, sometimes around the card table. My mom reminded my brother and I to swim in the buddy system. Swimming in the lake, sometimes a fish or disoriented turtle would brush against your leg. No big deal. We were swimming around when my friend's little brother lets out a startled yelp. "Some fish just bumped me!" I laughed. Our school buddy ignored him, and his brother went underwater to see if it was a big catfish or a turtle. As he goes underwater to investigate, his little brother yells out again. Suddenly, there was a flurry of bubbles. I felt something big swim past me. Fast. It was so big that I could feel the pull of the water as it moved. It looked like a black cloud, with something reaching out from underneath as it swam. When my buddy came up a second later, panicking and gasping for air, we were already shrieking for help, and we all started swimming to land, screaming. My neighbor's aunt, a no-nonsense woman, screamed for her husband to come out, and she ran toward us from the upstairs deck. She was screaming for us to get out. There was something in the water. Lots of screaming. We were frantically swimming back to the dock. My friend's little brother gets violently pulled underwater by the shadow, but pops back up in a millisecond, freaking out. The thing circled around us a few times as we swam back. More bubbles for a second, and then nothing. Her husband comes running out with a gun, runs to the dock. His wife runs to us and hurried us into the downstairs back porch. My neighbor, who went underwater, had this weird scrape on his upper thigh and around his hand and wrist. It burned and made him feel sick. His little brother had the same markings on his leg where he was grabbed. An older couple on their boat heard the commotion and raced over to help, but saw nothing of the monster. Parents called the wildlife officers and police. I will never swim in dark water again. My neighbor's aunt, to this day, doesn't like to think about it. She says she saw the devil in the lake that night. My whole town is haunted. So haunted that Town Hall hired an investigation crew to come live here, and then dedicated an entire section in our library to the town's paranormal activity. My favorite and most terrifying story is about the fog monsters. We get this Silent Hill-esque fog every now and then, and according to local legend, the silhouettes of figures can be seen when peering into the fog. Most people recount seeing the silhouettes of children and young adults believed to be settlers from the 1700s. There are these two figures in particular, though, that earn their own stories. One of them is a quadrupedal hound. They're massive, easily 6 feet, standing on all fours, and the other seems to be a little girl. But what's notable about her is that only her dress really seems visible. You can make out her shape and outline just fine, but looking directly at her limbs or face seemingly makes them disappear while the floating dress stays. Although these figures seem dangerous, there haven't been any reports of them actually hurting people. In my experience, they actually led me home when I was lost one day. I wasn't near them, but there's a wave of fear that comes over you when you see them that just screams, "Go the other way." While I was lost, they seemed to group up and completely block off the roads, standing still, just staring at me. I got home by just going down whichever roads they weren't on. So in a sense, they seem pretty benevolent, but they might just have a strong sense of community, as I do live where they did. Back to the two special figures, though. There's a legend of the girl visiting you in your dreams, mostly appearing in the dreams of children. She beckons you into the woods to play with her. When you wake up, you get a strong urge to go back to the place she takes you in your dreams. Apparently nobody who returned to the woods while awake has returned. A lot of people who dreamed of her reported that they've seen her commune with animals, and has sometimes been seen with a quadruped. That leads me to believe that the quadruped is actually this lady's pet. But these aren't what all the stories here are about. As an example, we have trails out in our woods for four-wheeling and dirt bikes. Sometimes while walking down one, the path straightens where it shouldn't and eventually leads to an opening in the woods. In the opening is a small cabin, a garden, and a sort of berry farm, like the kind that's in a dugout pit and gets filled with water for an easy harvest. Legend says that a witch lives in the cabin, but the place is difficult to find. As a child, I tried mapping out all of the woods here to find it, but I've only ever been there twice, and both times were by accident. This is from the town of Chester, New Hampshire. I can't say for certain that you'll encounter anything if you come here, but almost all of the residents have. Check out the library sometime if you're in the neighborhood. Back when we were about 14, my friends and I went up to stay at our buddy's family farm in rural New Hampshire. Not much up there, besides farmland and miles of deep woods. It was around midnight, and we had just spent a few hours messing around, smoking cigars, and building a bonfire up in one of the cow pastures. To get back to the house from the pasture, you needed to walk about a half a mile through the woods and across another field. And the kid's dad had a tradition of messing with us on our way back. The usual routine was waiting on the porch and shooting Roman candles at us as we crossed the field. We started walking back, and as we emerged from the path, we started hearing loud rustling noises in the trees along the edge of the field, about 70 yards away. We all ran into the middle of the field and hit the deck smiling, thinking my buddy's dad was about to start shooting fireworks at us. After about 5 minutes of the intermittent leaf rustling and no Roman candles, our smiles were gone, and we started debating if it was a black bear or some other big animal. The rustling was distinctly the sound of footsteps, and would pick up and suddenly stop, as if someone was running tree to tree. Thoroughly freaked out, my buddy pulls out his cell phone and calls the landline at his house. He stands up and walks a little in the direction of the house, while my other friend and I stay laying down, staring in the direction of the noises. Suddenly, something runs out of the tree line. I will never forget this image for as long as I live. We were still about 50 yards away, and there was only a crescent moon out, so there wasn't much light to make out fine details. But we watched as this inhumanly tall thing strode across a portion of the field and then back into the trees. It was skinny, with disproportionately long limbs, and in the dark appeared to be a solid light gray-white color. As it ran, its incredibly long arms and legs swung in this disturbingly unusual way, and it appeared to be moving much faster than it should have been. As fast as it had appeared, it was gone back into the forest. My friend and I looked at each other in silent horror. We stand up, ready to book it back to the house. My other friend walks back over to us, oblivious to what we just saw. His dad picked up. He said he's been in bed for an hour. Without saying anything, me and my other friend who witnessed it started sprinting for our lives back to the house. The third friend follows suit. We make it back, lock all the doors, and recount what we saw to the other friend and his dad. None of us slept that night. When we went downstairs in the morning, my friend's dad, whose bedroom was on the ground floor, tells us how throughout the night he heard something banging on the side of the house and windows, and claimed he went out several times with his shotgun to find nothing. We thought he was just fucking with us at the time, but to this day he stands by that story. As someone who doesn't believe in the paranormal, it's not a story I tell often, but the two friends who were there and I still talk about it regularly, and it scares the shit out of us. Just this year, I shared it with another buddy of mine who loves that type of stuff. After a quick Google search, he shows me a link. When I saw it, I nearly shit my pants. The description and depiction of this creature from local folklore matched what I saw perfectly. I honestly don't know what to believe, but I know what I saw, and it's safe to say you're never going to catch me in the New Hampshire woods past sunset again. The stretch of forest adjacent to his family's farm has been known locally as Bones Woods and Devil's Wood for as long as his family has lived in the area.